Burgundy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my very first movie review. Please forgive the lack of a full intro and outro with me in it, and also my kinda weird voice. I am currently recovering from bronchitis and, in fact, a litany of illnesses that may or may not have been caused by severe allergies, which may or may not have been caused by an excess of particulate matter created by the unprecedented wildfires that recently ravaged Northern California. Anyway, Detective Pikachu. I will be avoiding major spoilers and only using still images taken from the trailers, and I'll even be avoiding some parts that were in the trailers because they were pretty darn spoilery, and if you happen to miss them, I'd hate to be the one to, give it away. Oh man, seriously, my voice is really, it's hard to do. I'm sorry. Bear with me here. So I know my review is coming a little late. It was a good few days before I could physically drag myself out of bed and to the theater without coughing myself to death. And, I don't know, reviews have been pretty okay, obviously with Pokemon fans being a little warmer with their reception. Most of the opinions I'm seeing on Twitter, though, from people I follow, mostly other YouTubers, are like, it was pretty good. Like, they thought it was, decent time. And you know what? Going in, that's kind of what I expected. I even said in my impressions video for the trailer that I was excited to see how it turned out, though for the most part I expected that it would be a fine movie, even if nothing really special. I thought we would all be lucky and it would stand high above most video game adaptations if it was even just serviceable. So I was pleasantly surprised to find that I love this movie. I love this movie. I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. That is indeed coming from a Pokemon fan, though I'm trying my best to look at it from both the perspective of a longtime fan and a guy who, just likes movies. Trying to look at it as objectively as possible. I won't go into too much of the plot, but obviously you've got Ryan Reynolds voicing a smart-talking Pikachu who for some reason can talk to this guy, Tim Goodman. They team up to figure out who killed Tim's father and uncover a much bigger mystery affecting the city. And that whole Ryan Reynolds Pikachu thing, that never sounded right to me. It always sounded like a bad idea, all the way back when they first announced the movie. It's such a Hollywood thing to do, you know what I mean? But it works. It works on the level that it was intended to sort of help bridge the gap with non-fans by giving them at least one Pokemon that can talk, but it also works because the writing is good. This whole thing where he's constantly dishing out one-liners, a lot of which are for the adults in the room and the kids won't even get, that is a recipe for disaster. That is exactly the kind of thing that will completely kill a movie for me. Yet they pulled it off. Reynolds is genuinely funny. Like, sure, plenty of his lines kind of border on obvious or overdone, and in fact, his whole concept borders on obvious and overdone, yet, like I said, it just works. For every halfway lame line, he blurts out 10 or 20 funny ones. He successfully plays to my adult sensibilities, while also providing plenty of simpler humor for the kids too, especially thanks to his expressiveness. Most movies like this will just take the voice and animate the face to match it, but in this case, they used a lot of mocap from Reynolds himself, and it really shows. He's incredibly expressive. One of the reasons this movie works when other similar movies fail is that it doesn't pander. That is the biggest thing right there. It doesn't talk down to kids. Like, you can completely get a sense of what the writers think of kids when you see a kids movie. Like, that's why I don't like most of them. There's a certain lack of effort that's easy to identify even in a movie's trailer. But Detective Pikachu doesn't feel like it has to stoop down to a kid's level. It doesn't constantly go for the low-hanging fruit. Does it a couple times? Sure, there are one or two stupid fart jokes in there, but like I said, it always moves on swiftly to something more intelligent, so it's easier to take as a part of the overall product. It feels more good-natured. And sometimes it even pushes further into adult humor than I expected, but yet again, it never feels forced. It doesn't feel like it's in bad taste. In fact, it actually kind of does work to make the movie feel a little more mature. I know that's what Hollywood usually tries to do with jokes like that, but it rarely works when they force it. This feels natural though, like it's comfortable with not making everything squeaky clean and kid-friendly. A lot of the humor comes from the Pokemon themselves. In addition to simple visual gags, the movie also pokes fun at how monstrous and weird some of these Pokemon would be in real life, but it never does it at the idea's expense, if that makes sense. It never takes it so far that it seems like it's mocking the concept. Speaking of them Pokemons, the movie takes place in Rhyme City, where there are generally no Pokeballs or trainer battles, and this is a really clever way to introduce the general audience to Pokemon in a very natural, visual way. Everybody's got partner Pokemon, and they all move and work together naturally. The look of the Pokemon themselves was another thing I was a tiny bit skeptical of when I first saw the trailer. They're cartoonish, like in their video game and anime counterparts, and very much embody those original designs, but they're also rendered a bit more realistically. Scales here, fur there, skin texturing, feathers, etc. At first I wondered if this would work, but I can say now that it absolutely does. It did not take long at all before I was completely into the style, and in fact I think it's a perfect balance. It's accurate without looking so cartoony that they don't fit into the world. It's realistic without just, not looking like Pokemon anymore. And that of course leads me to the most important part of this review: how the movie affected me as a Pokemon fan. Seeing all these Pokemon depicted like this, living naturally in this world, it's an absolute joy. Sure, you'll see tons of repeats, but the roster overall is satisfyingly big. The movie offers an absolutely perfect mix of new Pokemon and old. Plenty of that nostalgia representation from Gen 1, with so many newer monsters though that no one could accuse it of only going for the nostalgia, which could have easily happened with a project like this. And dude, whenever the action ramps up and you get to see Pokemon fight and use their moves and be Pokemon, I'm trying really hard to look at the movie from those two different perspectives I was talking about, but I will completely admit that I can't actually entirely separate the two. So much of my enjoyment comes from seeing Pokemon depicted this way up on the big screen. It's just surreal. It's filling a little hole that's been inside of me since I was 11. For literally 20 years, I've been waiting for something like this. They're these dumb cartoony monsters, and yet watching them in action up there is thrilling. Seeing the world of Pokemon come to life like this is, it's pure joy. And this is thanks to the fact that this was a fan effort through and through. Video game movies are famous for only vaguely referencing the source material and trying so hard to please general audiences that they end up pleasing no one. That's what game movies do. It's exactly what the Sonic movie is doing. But Detective Pikachu does not compromise. When the movie first started, I kept expecting that moment that comes with basically every video game movie. You know what I mean? That moment where someone's like, oh, didn't you know Pokemon are like this? And then you're just like, no, they're not. That's stupid. Pokemon were created by this company, and they evolve when you put them in this machine, and they're actually robots. Something like that, you know what I mean? I was waiting for the Hollywoodization. The thing that the big studio backing the project stepped in and demanded to make it all more palatable for the moms and dads or some junk. I don't even know why they do what they do. But that moment didn't come. This is the world of Pokemon. This world works the way Pokemon works, down to every last detail. There are Pokemon with moves that Pokemon have, and there are trainers and league battles, and if you see a Pokemon, it's probably not going to be doing something that a Pokemon wouldn't actually do. If there's one single thing you might call a compromise, it's the fact that this world is basically our world with Pokemon integrated into it. You've got grimy city streets and cars and whatnot, instead of the very foreign, kind of futuristic look of much of the architecture in the games. The games always look like they're set in some weird other place or an alternate timeline, but this is much more of a case of Pokemon being kind of plastered all over the real world. And this is a compromise I'm completely okay with. One, if every shot in the entire movie had to be green screened and every set had to be specially built or CG'd into the background, it would have probably doubled the budget of the movie. Two, this further helps to bridge that gap with general audiences, and whatever you may think, that is indeed an important part of all this. If they went for a 100% accurate representation of the more fantastical Pokemon universe but didn't land it just right, the look of the movie would feel off and a lot less relatable. Three, it just works this way. And when I see these Pokemon and how they move and function, I don't even care that they're walking around regular old city streets and riding around in regular old cars. It doesn't bother me that humans are drinking espresso instead of going to the special Miltank milk bar, or they're using their smartphones instead of their wacky trainer gear on their arm. If anything, it's just more easygoing and natural this way. It feels weird to say it, but it's almost relieving that they did it this way instead of trying to establish this whole giant other wacky universe that was a perfect representation of the games and the anime. This just stands on its own really well. And if anything, it kind of better answers the question that I've been asking my whole entire life. How would things be if Pokemon just were real? Not if I lived in the Pokemon universe, but if this universe were the way that it is now, except Pokemon are in it, you know what I mean? So I like that aspect of it. In the same way that the movie represents both new and old Pokemon, it also tailors to every type of fan, which is another thing that I just wouldn't expect from a movie like this. You've got your simpler jokes, like the visual humor I was talking about. Lickitung got a big gross tongue and licks stuff. You know, anyone can figure that out. But layered in there are all these nods and references that only a person who's very familiar with Pokemon will get. Sometimes it's stuff from the games, and sometimes it's aimed at people who grew up with the anime. There's something for absolutely everybody here, and that does so much to make the movie feel that much more genuine, like it's truly coming from a place of love, from fans, for fans. Again, there are no compromises. This is Pokemon. I would gush about how amazing it was seeing Bulbasaurs walking around a forest for an hour if I let myself, so let's swing back around to the plot. One thing that does indeed make the movie more than just a blast of nostalgia or a funny romp is the fact that the story moves along at a good pace and takes the characters into a good variety of locales and situations. Like any good movie, there's always something fun happening. It really is a mystery movie, so we're constantly piecing together what's been happening in the city, but it also gives the characters ample opportunities to get into trouble with fights and chase sequences and the like. It finds a lot of ways to take them away from the dingy city streets and mix up the visual palette of the movie. And again, no spoilers, obviously. Do I even need to warn about it so much? I don't know, but I'm gonna anyway. The movie wraps itself up into a plot that is a lot bigger and more epic than it initially seems. And let me just say, it does so in a way that I like a whole lot, and it really ties into that whole I can't believe I'm watching Pokemon like this on the big screen thing. Though I will say, even if the plot is well paced and filled with a lot of fun sequences, it's probably the weakest part of the film on a more objective level when you stop and think about it. There's always an underlying thing with a movie like this. There's the one mystery, the one concept that ends up being behind everything. But this movie has like 3 different things and kind of crams them all together. Like any one of those things could have been it, and the movie could have been written around it. But it's like they couldn't decide which they wanted to use, so they just made them all work at once. They wanted to have their jelly donuts and eat them too. It comes off as sort of convoluted and almost like a wasted opportunity, because I have to wonder what any of the concepts would have looked like if allowed to develop entirely on their own. It really is a small gripe though, and one that's pretty easy to overlook because of how entertaining the movie is otherwise. And now for my closing statement. This movie might have a strange concept. It's weird hearing Pikachu swear and give poignant monologues in a deep man's voice. It's downright surreal at times, and yet it so perfectly captures the spirit of Pokemon and so perfectly introduces the idea of a cinematic Pokemon universe. I know they're already developing a sequel, and if that's what we get next, I'm sure it'll be fine, but a sequel is not what I want. I want this movie to open the door for other Pokemon stories. Now that we've had a taste of the world and we've washed it down with a snarky talking Pokemon protagonist, I want to see that world expanded. I want them to go bigger. I want to see a more traditional adventure with even more locales and more Pokemon battles. I don't know if that will happen because I don't know how viable that kind of thing is. It really will depend a lot on the ticket sales of this one. The Detective Pikachu angle was weird, but also really kind of marketable. If this movie sells well, will it only be because it's got that hook for the grown-ups? Or will it sell well simply because it's a cool Pokemon movie that Pokemon fans like? I don't know, but I hope, beyond all hope that it's the latter. And you know what, even if it's weird, I am happy about the Detective Pikachu thing because it showed us how you can make a Pokemon movie that's not about Ash or Red or whatever. It doesn't have to be a direct adaptation of the games or the anime. It can be whatever it wants. I do want the next one to be a little more traditional, and I don't know if you do that by trying to incorporate these characters we already have or by taking a risk and making all new ones, but I want to see it happen. I always hate when I sound like a corporate shill, but I will say that if you want a future with more awesome Pokemon movies, don't sleep on this one. This is the biggest, most authentic, and most important video game adaptation movie ever created, and we need to send a message to Hollywood that this is a game movie done right. We want to see more Pokemon movies, and we want to see more game movies in general with a shred of care put into them while they're at it. I don't really rate things that aren't games, so I won't give this movie a score. And hey, you know what, maybe you'll hear this review and then you'll go watch it and you'll only think it's okay, like a lot of people seem to do. But I can just tell you right now, I loved it. I loved it. I just loved it. I'm not even kidding. There were some moments that made me a little emotional because they just hit me so hard in the kid feels. You know, like I got so caught up in the joy of the movie, the joy of the world of Pokemon. It made me feel like I haven't felt about Pokemon for decades. I was afraid that after my first viewing, the whole novelty of it would wear off, and I would be bored on the second time through, but nope. I went to see it again the next day, this time with a bunch of friends, and we all had a great time. We all came away with smiles, talking about our favorite parts, and laughing about the best jokes. If you've got some Pokemon-loving friends, I do heavily suggest you round them all up and head to the theater, because it is definitely the best way to experience the movie. Thank you for watching. Head on down to the comments and let me know what you guys think about Detective Pikachu and what it might mean for the future of Pokemon movies and or video game movies as a whole. Before I go, I'll do a more detailed shout out later, but I just wanted to get this out there. I just revamped all of my Patreon a ton, and right now, for only $2, you can get access to Arlo casts where I talk about stuff that won't fit in videos, and I talk about upcoming videos. There's a new private Arlo Discord server that you can get in on, and all this different stuff. Basically, almost everything I've offered anybody before, except now at $2. So go check it out. We're having a great time on the Discord server. You have a great day, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go and not talk for I don't know, 4 or 5 days. Oh, goodness.